I want to lecture today on the subject, the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. The book I wrote, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, is a book to help you really become a better leader. And the way that we become a better leader is by learning the laws. In fact, in the book, I talk about the fact that if you follow the laws, people will follow you. There's an inference that if you don't follow the laws, people won't follow you. Leadership is my love, leadership is my life, leadership is my passion. And I suppose that the proverb writer in the Message in the Old Testament says it maybe better than I could ever say it, and in your notes are these words: when the country is in chaos, everybody has a plan to fix it, but it takes a leader of real understanding to straighten things out. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about these laws. Let's talk about the subject of leadership. Well, let me ask you a question, first of all. How many of you like to play golf? How many golfers do I have here? Oh, you got a lot of golfers, okay. And you know what I found about golfers? Because I like to play golf, what I found out about golfers is that even if we're not any good, it doesn't lessen our passion. Isn't that true? I mean, we still love to do it, don't we? I mean, we're not very good and we lose a lot of golf balls, but we still have that passion to play golf. So I love to play golf. Two golfers teeing it up on the very first tee, not good at all. First guy, when he hits the ball, much to his surprise, the ball goes straight down the fairway. Now he's excited. He's ecstatic. He's never been in the middle of the fairway. I mean, he's the kind of golfer that in his golf bag, he has things like a weed eater. He has a Johnson's power saw, you know what I mean, to go out and clear the brush for him, okay? He's got a beagle that can hunt out those golf balls. I mean, really flush them out. So he's in the middle of the fairway. He's so excited. They're walking up about 12 yards. Much to his surprise, when they get up there, he's not only in the middle of the fairway, but his ball has rolled up on about a 4-inch anthill. So now he's in the middle of the fairway and his ball is teed up. He grabs his 3-wood. He looks at his buddy and says, "This is of God." He swings as hard as he can with that 3-wood. He misses the whole ball and kills 5,000 ants. Miracle of miracles, that anthill that was 4 inches just gets reduced to 2 inches and the ball stays on top of the anthill. He's got a second opportunity. He grabs a 3-wood, swings as hard as he can, misses the whole ball again, and kills 4,998 ants. By the way, this is a true story. Two ants are left. One ant looks at the other and says, "I don't know about you, but if we're going to survive, we had better get on the ball." Now, if we're going to survive in the business world, if we're going to survive in the church world, if we're going to survive in the country, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to get on the ball. And when I wrote the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, I wrote these laws with a heart to really help people learn how to lead more effectively. Now, let me just share with you. Somebody asked me recently, he said, "How long did it take you to write this book?" Well, my answer to that one is it's taken about 20 years. For over 20 years, I've been teaching leadership. And what I've been watching is that when I teach leadership, there are certain principles and certain thoughts about leadership that just rise to the top every time. And over 20 years, I've kind of just skimmed the top and I pulled off these principles. I pulled off what now I know are laws. And I've kind of set them aside. And I've said to myself, if you're going to learn how to lead, you really got to get this under your belt. And after a period of 20 years plus of teaching leadership, what I found is that there are just certain laws that you can go to the bank on. And so what I did is, in forming the book and in writing the book and thinking through how can I best teach leadership, I would sit down with other good leaders and I would say, okay, talk to me for a moment. And I would throw out one of the laws and I'd say, do you think that's a law? Do you think that's a law that you can either make it or be broken off of it? I mean, is this a do or die type of a situation? And I bounced it off of other people for quite some time. And it was so much fun recently to give birth to this book. Because as I teach you these laws, you know what I know you're going to find out? You're going to write down these laws, you're going to listen to these laws, you're going to learn these laws, and they're going to speak to your heart, and you're going to say, whoa, this will make a difference in my leadership. Now, there was a series of qualifying thoughts and tests that I kind of put these laws through, a kind of a grid to make sure that they were the laws that I really needed to teach that would make a difference in your life. And in your notebook, I would like to walk you through 4 of those qualifying tests. How did these laws really become laws? Number 1, these 21 laws are not based on culture, gender, or age. What I mean by that is very simple. The 21 laws that I'm going to teach you not only would work here, but they would work in another culture. They would work in another country. The reason I know that is I've taught these laws in other countries. The laws are the laws, and regardless of your culture, regardless of your gender, regardless of whether you're young or old, these laws will work in your life. The second thing I want you to note about qualifying these laws was that the laws, they relate and apply to all communities. What I mean by that is they relate to the business community, they relate to the academic community, they relate to the government community, they relate to the religious community. In fact, in this auditorium here, we have people from the business world, we have people from the church world, we have people from the academic world, we have people from the government world, we have all kinds here. And what's wonderful about these laws, no matter what world you live in right now, no matter what your job, no matter what your occupation, no matter what kind of business or profession you have, these laws will work. Number 3, these laws are recognized by other leaders as leadership laws. As I shared with you just a moment ago, I kind of tested them. I would talk to leaders and say, what do you think? And I would get their input. And number 4, the 21 laws that we're going to learn, these laws stand the test of time. In other words, they're not going to go out. This is not a kind of a faddish type of a deal. In other words, 10 years from now, these laws will not be kind of outdated. In fact, if you would go back last century, the 21 laws I'm teaching absolutely would have worked in the last century. They're going to work as we are now getting ready to go into the 21st century. These laws stand the test of time. Now, let me give you 3 observations about the 21 laws. Number 1, these laws can be learned. Now, I love teaching the 21 laws because they can be learned. In other words, as we get together in these next few hours, I talk to you and I teach you these laws. The reason I'm so excited is because every one of you can learn these laws. Now, the reason I know that is because for over 20 years, I've lived these laws, I've taught these laws, and I have raised up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of leaders. I could put a name behind every law. In other words, as I teach the law, I could say, I taught Joe that, I taught Stacy that. In other words, these laws are transferable. Now, there are some that are more easily transferred than others. I'm not saying that they're all the same as far as being easily taught. There are some that'll be harder for you. There'll be some that'll be very easy for you. In fact, when I give some of them to you, you'll say, oh, I've already got that one down. And there'll be others you'll say, oh man, I don't know if I'll ever get that one down. For some it's going to be quick, for some it's going to be slow. But all 21 laws can be taught. Now, one of the 21 laws is the most difficult to teach, is a law that I'll teach you a little later called the law of intuition. It's a tough law to teach, but I've taught it. There's a way that a person can have what I would call informed intuition until they can even be good in that area. but all 21 laws can be taught. So what excites me about teaching here for these next few hours with you is the fact that I'm going to give you something that you can truly learn. In fact, I want you to look at your neighbor right now and tell your neighbor, even you can learn these laws. Go ahead and tell them that, huh? I love it. I love watching you. There are some of you that I mean, you're saying, you're not only saying that to him, you're kind of saying, and I wish you would learn these laws too. Oh, please, hey, please learn these laws. Would you please learn these laws? Okay. Now, what I love about these laws is that they're teachable, they're transferable. The second observation I would make about these laws is that they stand alone. The laws that I'm going to give you, the 21 laws, they stand alone. You say, John, what do you mean by that? You don't have to learn law number 1 to be able to learn law number 2. And you don't have to learn law 1 and 2 to learn law number 3. They don't stack that way. You may do really good with law number 1. You may not do good at all with law number 1. But what we'll find is that these 21 laws, they all are laws, but there is an independence about them. Now, when I say they're independent, one of the reasons that leadership is so difficult to teach is the fact that leadership is many-faceted. A person gets one law under the belt, that doesn't make you a leader. It's just like a fellow came to me the other day, I love this, at a conference, Bill. He came to me the other day and he said, he was a young pastor, kind of, I'd say he's 25, 26. And he said, okay, John, he said, okay, I know I need to learn leadership. Okay, I'm feeling good. He needs to learn leadership, and he knows this. He says, tell me the one thing I need to know to be a great leader. And my response is the same. I'm kind of chuckling. The one thing you need to know. And he said, give it to me, but give it to me simple and give it to me in one shot so I can really get it. Well, the one shot I wanted to tell him was that there's no one shot. It's going to take a long time because leadership is many-faceted, and the 21 laws tells you that if you learn a couple laws, that's good, but that doesn't make you a leader. In fact, the way this really works, since they stand alone and they're independent. See, they're independent, but they do interlock. That's very key. They stand alone, but they do relate to one another. So if you know 5 of the 21 laws, okay, you're maybe a fair leader, but if you learn 7 or 8 of those laws or get up to 10 laws, you're a better leader now than you were when you knew 5. In other words, every time you put the law under your belt, you become a better leader. That's how you measure your progress. So many times when I teach leadership, people say, well, how do I know if I'm progressing? How do I know if I'm really making the progress that I want to make? It's very simple. Every time you put another law under your belt, you're becoming just a little bit better leader. The third thing I want you to know about the laws is that these laws carry consequences. In fact, that's why they are known kind of as laws. In other words, if you obey them, you're going to receive good stuff, and if you don't obey them, you're going to be in trouble. Again, in the book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, the little subheading says, follow these and people will follow you. If you don't follow these laws, people won't follow you. You say, well, John, you start teaching these laws, or I read your book, and I can tell you right now, there are a couple laws in your book I don't like. Do you think I care? Do you think that bothers me? There's probably a couple laws I don't like, but it doesn't matter. It's still a law. And if you don't learn it and if you don't follow it, it's going to mess you up. It's kind of like a guy says, well, I'll tell you right now, I disagree with the law of gravity. Jump out of the building. I promise you, you'll go about 2 or 3 stories down and you'll very quickly believe that there is a law of gravity. There's consequences. And I love it when people say, well, I don't think I like that law. I don't care whether you like it or not. You can either learn it and have people follow you, or you can hang over there in the corner all by yourself and say, I don't like the law, and have nobody following you and nobody caring. It's a law. Those laws have consequences. The reason that I have such a passion to teach leadership is because here's what I know. Every time you put a law under your belt, you're going to be a better leader. And every time you do that, you're going to be able to lead more people. But the laws do have consequences. In fact, in the table of contents in the book, I'm just going to give you one classic one, okay? This was under the law of solid ground. But in the table of contents of the book, as you read each chapter, there will be just a couple of lines that will kind of describe that chapter. And under the law of solid ground, notice what I have in your notes. If only Robert McNamara had known the law of solid ground, the war in Vietnam and everything that happened at home because of it might have turned out differently. Wow. That's a pretty big consequence to pay just because you don't understand the law of solid ground. But they all have consequences. The fourth thing I want you to know about the laws is that these laws are the foundation of leadership. In other words, you build your leadership off of these laws. They're the foundation. They're the groundwork. It's off of them that you really build them. Now, what I want to do, in order to give you the right kind of a foundation for leadership, is I want to work you through a process here for a second. One of the things that's my desire in teaching these laws is to give you a strategy so that you can be a better leader. So I have developed in the 21 laws an intentional process to develop you as a leader. Let me walk you through it. First of all is the book, again, the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And the book is a picture of the laws. And in that little blank beside that, put the word understanding. The book is to give you an understanding of those laws. You read it, and all of a sudden you say, oh, I understand what that law means. That's all the book is. It's a picture of the laws. Right behind the book, though, we have developed a series of audio cassette tapes, which are personal application of the laws. And beside that, put the phrase, or the two words, personal growth. The audio tape series are 22 tapes, one tape of an introduction, and 21 tapes which describes the law. But now here's the difference. The book gives you a picture so you understand the law. The audio cassette tapes are for your own personal growth and development, and they help you do three things. They help you assess your personal, how well you do that law. There's an assessment section. With the 21 tapes is a workbook, about a 150-page workbook. They help you assess how well you do that law. Then there's an application section, which I sit down and I teach you how to apply the law in your life. And the last part of the workbook is an action section where you take action on the laws so to flesh them out. Now, I'm so excited about this. This is called Living the 21 Laws of Leadership. I'm so excited because what this is going to do is this is going to provide for you a personal growth plan for your own leadership development with the 22 tapes and the workbook. They go side by side, and it's for you. You can take it and you can go on your own pace. What I'm going to suggest on this wonderful resource of Living the 21 Laws of Leadership, what I'm going to suggest is that you take 21 months. You take 1 month per each law. Now I know what you're saying. Oh, you're saying, oh, John, that's an awful long time. Well, I know it is. But a lot of us are awfully slow. And I want us to take a long time. You know why? A subject like leadership is so important. We want to get it done well. We don't want to take shortcuts. Does that make sense? You really want to put it under your belt. Now, you don't have to take 21 months. You may say, I want to do 2 tapes a month. That's your business. But what I love about the Living the Laws resource section is that it has the workbook and it has the 21 tapes. Then there's one other process here, and that is the videotapes. And this helps your organization apply these laws. And let me tell you what that is. Beside that, put leadership training. What I mean by that is these laws are on video so that you can take them back to your business or to your church, and you can have a leadership weekend, Or you can, if you want to, take each law for 21 weeks and show each law, because they last about 25 minutes each. And you can show the law and people can see it. What I would do is this. I would put the 21 Irrefutable Laws book into every one of my leaders' hands. Then I would show them the video so that it would further enhance their understanding of the laws. And then I would put them all on the Living the Laws Personal Growth Application Plan. What would happen in your church? What would happen in your business if we would put together that kind of process and that kind of strategy? I was on the plane recently, and I was going from the United States to Australia. It was just a few months ago. I was doing a conference in Australia. In fact, I was doing 2 conferences. There was a lady right beside me. Her name was Colette Bottomfoot, and she was in charge of leadership training for EDS in the Pacific Rim. And she was a very pleasant lady, and we're just talking a little bit on the plane, and after a while she wanted to know what I did, and so I began to share with her kind of my background and what I did, and that I taught leadership. And as soon as I told her I taught leadership, her eyes kind of began to sparkle, and she kind of sat up in the plane, and she said, "Talk to me for a moment." She said, "How do you teach leadership?" And so I began to share with her a little bit, and I walked her through this process that I walked you through. That if you're going to learn how to be a leader, it takes a long time. And if you're going to learn to be a leader, you have to have a strategy to really put leadership under your belt. So I told her, I said, "I've written this book, the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, to help people with understanding, and then we're going to do these individual cassette tapes for personal application so that a person can literally keep it with them for the next year to year and a half, 2 years probably, to really put those laws under the belt. And then we're going to do a video series called Learning the Laws of Leadership so that you can show them to your business." Now, when I'm teaching her and talking to her about all this stuff, she's taking notes. She said, "Okay, I want your address." She said, "I want to get this stuff." And then she said, "Because my greatest challenge as a leader is teaching leadership to other people." I knew exactly what she meant. What she was really saying to me is, "John, leadership has a tendency to be mystical. Leadership has a tendency to, you try to put your arms around it, and it's kind of elusive." And she said, "I'm just looking for tangible ways to not only grow myself as a leader, but I'm learning for tangible ways to grow other people as leaders also." We are beginning today, in your life and in my life, a process that will truly make a difference. If what I have already said, you have not only been taking notes, but in your mind and your heart, you're settling in on some of these issues, I promise you, your life is about to be changed. Because, listen carefully, we want to raise up men and women who are great Christian leaders. That's our goal. That's my goal. And it's going to take some time. And what we have got to quit doing, we have got to quit trying to microwave leaders. We've got to quit trying to grab a leader and put him in a microwave and push a couple buttons, and a minute and a half later, or bring them out and say, "Ooh, I got one." We've got to quit microwaving leaders. And we need to start crock-potting leaders. We want to put them in the crock pot. We don't want to let them simmer. We want to let them marinate. Because we know that's the way to develop leaders. I have never known anything great or anyone great that did it quickly. Does this make sense? So let's dive in. And let's study, learn, and grow as a leader as we study the 21 laws of leadership. The The first law of leadership is what I call the law of the lid. L-I-D. The law of the lid. And the law of the lid says that leadership determines the level of effectiveness. The law of the lid basically says that our leadership level determines our organization's level. That our leadership level determines our church's size. In other words, our leadership is a lid. And that lid keeps everything under it from going any higher. This is an incredible law. In fact, the reason I put it first is not because it's the most important law. Remember, all the laws stand alone. The reason that I put it first is not because it's most important. I put it first because this is where I get the passion to learn to be a leader. This law gives me passion. And let me explain to you why. Here's the way this works. If this hand represents my ability to lead, and this hand represents my organization, my church, my business, my company, whatever. But this is how well John Maxwell leads. If this hand represents my leadership, this hand represents my organization. Here's what I know today about my church or my business. If this is how well I lead, my organization, my church, will always stay underneath the lid of my leadership. My leadership determines the size of my company. My leadership determines the size of my church. It's the lid. It keeps us from growing. It keeps us from reaching our potential. Our leadership lid is what we are today. Nothing more, nothing less. In the history of mankind, you have never seen an organization grow beyond the lid of the leadership that's in it. An organization doesn't keep growing and the leadership stays the same. Leadership determines the size of the organization. So if from a 1 to a 10, my leadership is a 4, then my church, my youth group, my company, whatever, if my leadership is a 4, then my congregation size-wise is a 3. And can I tell you something? If I'm a 4 as a leader, my church isn't going to be a 7 and an 8 and a 9. You don't have 4 leaders leading 7 organizations. Just doesn't happen. So you say, oh, John, now I see why you're so passionate about this. In other words, my leadership will determine the size of my organization. That's it. Now, here's the good news. What I love about the 21 laws of leadership is the 21 laws of leadership can be taught. You can learn the laws. So here you are. Let's say you're here as a leader. And so therefore, here's my organization. And I start learning these laws, and I put another law under my belt, and I grow a little bit more. And then I put another law under my belt, and I grow a little bit more. And I put another leadership law under my belt, and I grow a little bit more. And I put another leadership law under my belt, and I grow a little bit more. Now what am I doing? I'm growing as a leader. Now, what happens when I grow as a leader? The moment I grow as a leader, my organization gets to grow too. In fact, a growing organization is the result and reflection of a growing leader. That's why I don't need to come to your church. I don't need to come to your business. All I need to do is grow you, because you're leaders in this room. If I can grow you, I can grow your church. I'm in the growing people business. I'm not in the growing church business, although I want to see them grow. I'm not in the growing business. I'm in the growing people business, because if I can grow you, because you're the lid, let's get that lid up. Does this make sense? Somebody asked me the other day, they said, John, what do you do? Now, my wife asks me that all the time too. John, what do you do? Well, it's kind of hard to describe what I do. I mean, it takes a long while. So basically I said, well, I write and I teach. Basically, that's what I do. I'm kind of a motivational teacher. I write and I teach. But they said, well, what do you do? And then all of a sudden it hit me. And it hit me probably because I've been working on this law. All of a sudden it hit me, Bill. I'll tell you what I am. I'm a lid lifter. That's what I do. I walk through people's lives and I lift lids. I take people like my buddy Bill and I say, Bill, let's lift the lid a little bit, huh? You're a young man.
Yes, he is.
Let's lift the lid. And his wife's vouching for that, okay? I said, let's lift the lid on you. And I go over and say, hey, come on, Israel, let's lift the lid. Let's get you up another level. Let's put some laws under your belt. All I do is, I just lift lids and let people out of boxes. It's kind of a wonderful job. It adds value to people. And the law of the lid is such an important law because what that law tells you and what that law tells me is that whatever our leadership ability is at this moment, that's going to be the size of our organization. That's why I put the chart in your notes. Do you see the chart? On the left-hand side, we have success without leadership. Now look at that. Let's say you're really committed and dedicated to success, and so you just get up to almost you're up there above an 8. You're about an 8.5 on the scale of 10 in success dedication. But as a leader, you're only a 1. Now look at the very small shade of effectiveness that you're going to have. But let's say you learn to lead. Let's say you keep the same work dedication, you put in the same hours, you do everything the same, but let's say you just start learning to lead. Look what happens when you start going up to the scale and you get to about a 6.5. All of a sudden, look how much more effective. You've multiplied your effectiveness. Why? Because you have learned how to lead. The proverb writer was right. Look what he said in Proverbs 29. When good people run things, everyone is glad. But when the ruler is bad, everyone groans. Boy, isn't that the truth? Haven't we groaned before? Wow. In the Old Testament, when Israel had a good king, what did they do? They prospered. When Israel had a bad king, what did they do? Right down the tubes they went. When I lived in San Diego, I had a friend by the name of Don Stevenson who was kind of a mentor to me. I would meet with him every couple of months, and we'd have a couple of hour lunch, which basically he would eat the food, and I would ask the questions. And so I'd have my legal pad there, and he was a very successful businessman. He was the president of Global Hospitality. Okay. Now, Global Hospitality was a company that bought out other resorts, basically, that were going bankrupt. For example, they bought out La Costa. When La Costa was going down, what they do is they kind of took over, they would take over a resort that was not making it, and they would turn it around and then make a profit with it and sell it. That's basically what they did. They bought resorts that were going down. And so Don Stevenson, a wonderful friend, a wonderful Christian, was kind of mentoring me through this whole process. I still remember the day that I sat down with him and I got out my legal pad and I got out my pen and I started asking questions and I asked him, I said, let me ask you this, Don. I said, when you buy a resort or when you take over a resort that's about to go under, are there some things that you always do when you take over that resort? And Don Stevenson looked at me, and through all the wisdom of all the years of him doing this, he looked at me and said, yes, John. He said, there are two things we always do when we buy a resort that's going down. Now, as soon as he had said there are two things that we always do, gang, I've got my pen ready. I know I'm about to get some gravy, okay? And I'm ready to listen. I said, what are they? He said, the first thing we do when we buy out a resort that's going under, he said, the first thing we do is we do a lot of in-depth training to all of the people in that organization that are what we call the up-front people. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, you know, when you check in at a resort, you got the guys out there that are handling the bags, and you got the tellers behind the desk that are checking you in. He said, anybody in the resort that comes face to face with the customer, he said, we train them. He said, we train them relationship training. We train them how to remember names. We train them courtesy, servanthood. He said, we train them how to treat people well. I'm going, oh, okay, I got that one down. Train the people who meet people. Pretty good, isn't it? See, I was pastoring at the time, so I said, okay, that means, John, you need to train the ushers. Trust me. Trust me. I go to a lot of churches. They need to train the ushers. I'm running into a lot of ushers who can't ush. Are you getting the picture? Train the upfront people. Okay. I said, what's the second thing, Don? What's the second thing that you always do when you buy out a company that's going under? And he looked at me, he said, we always fire the president. I said, excuse me, Don, excuse me. Did I hear you say that you always fire the president? He said, yeah. He said, we always fire the president. In fact, he was saying that so matter-of-factly. He's still eating his food. Yeah, we always fire the president. Okay. I said, do you always fire him? He said, yeah. He said, we always fire him. I said, you don't go see him first and sit down and put a fire in the fireplace and hold hands and sing Kumbaya? No, he said, we don't do any of that stuff. We just fire him. You fire him? He said, we fire him. And he could tell I was struggling over that whole issue. And he said, John, listen to me. He said, if he would have been any good as a leader, the company wouldn't have been in the shape that it was in. He said, the very fact that the company is going down the tubes tells me we got the wrong leader. Hello? Anybody home? That's the day I learned the law of the lid. That's the day I understood that as the leader is, so shall the organization be. That's the day I learned that if the organization isn't growing, it's because you have a non-growing leader. If the organization is going down, it's because you got a declining leader. That's the day I realized that everything rises and falls on leadership. And you're saying, John, do you mean everything? Read my lips. I mean everything. If your church isn't growing, you've got a leadership problem. If your business isn't growing, you've got a leadership problem. If your denomination is stagnant and plateaued, you have a leadership problem. It's the law of the lid. Wow. Let me give you my own experience. As a young pastor, our church really grew pretty fast. In fact, when I was about 25 or 26, we had a church of 1,000. And so people were coming to me and they're saying, John, how do you grow this church? Well, I didn't know how you grow the church. You have to understand, I grew up in a leader's home. I had a lot of leadership training just basically by almost osmosis. And so therefore I was doing a lot of things right, but I didn't know how to really do them. I was just doing them right. And so when people started asking me how the church was growing, I started getting embarrassed because I couldn't tell them. In fact, I just said, this is getting ridiculous. I said, I'm going to figure out how this church is growing. I remember one day I told my assistant, I said, don't let anybody see me. I'm going to block the whole day. I got my legal pad out, and I wrote down everything I thought that was adding to the growth of the church. And at the end of the day, I had written out 88 things. I looked at that and I said, wow. I don't think I can do a lesson on the 88 keys to church growth. There's something kind of discouraging about that title, don't you think? You know, if a guy gets up and says, I'm going to talk to you about the 88 keys to church growth, you can't say, well, Mabel, this is going to be a long lesson today. So I tried to reduce it and bring it down. And finally I thought, you know why my church is growing? It's because I work hard. So I went around doing conferences, and I would tell all these pastors to work hard. I had this whole message on laziness. And I just kicked it an awful lot. I just said, come on, you guys, quit being so lazy, get up early, work late, ho, ho, ho. And then you know what happened? I saw these wonderful people who really did work hard. In fact, some of them who worked harder than me, and their church wasn't growing at all. And I thought, uh-oh, that's not how the church is growing. It's not the early bird getting the worm stuff. So then I said, okay, since I'm in the ministry and it's a church, I got to get spiritual here. So then I started saying, I know what you got to do. If you really want to grow a church, you got to get godly and spirit-filled. If you can get spirit-filled, you can really grow a church. So I had all these people coming down to get spirit-filled. You know what I'm saying? And they're praying and crying and asking God. And man, I'm praying, I'm feeling real good. I'm saying, wonderful. I'm saying, good, okay. Now I got them spirit-filled. And you know what? I found out they went back to their church, and it still didn't grow. That's when I realized that there's not a relationship. Don't get mad at me now. There's not a relationship between godliness and growth. Some of the most godly people I know in the world can't grow weeds. Are they going to heaven? Yep. They love God? Yep. Can they grow anything? Nope. And then I discovered it. In 1977, I discovered it. What I discovered is that everything rises and falls on leadership. That if you know how to lead, you can grow an organization. And if you don't know how to lead, you can be sincere, you can work hard, and you still can't grow the organization. I've seen it happen so many times. A non-leader leaves a church, and a leader goes into it, and it starts growing. A non-leader leaves a business, and a leader goes into it, and the business starts growing. Everything rises and falls on leadership. It's called the law of the lid. So we've got to ask ourselves some questions. In fact, in this workbook, I have designed some questions for us to ask. Let's look at them. What is the lid number on my leadership? From a 1 to a 10, 1 being poor and 10 being perfect. What kind of a number would you put on your leadership head today? You see, there are some of you in the room that you're a 2 or a 3. There are some of you that are 9 or 10. And I don't care what the number is today, because here's the good news. No matter what the number is today, you can grow as a leader. So the good news is, wherever you are, you want to begin to move up a notch or 2. But what is the number on your leadership? And then the second question, this is to keep you honest. Would those around me agree with my assessment? Oh, that is nasty, isn't it? Isn't it nasty to have a question like that? Ask your spouse. Well, maybe you shouldn't ask your spouse. Wait a couple of days until you're psychologically and emotionally strong. Then ask your spouse. Ask the people around you. What number would you put on my head as far as a leader? I love the story of you've heard the story, haven't you, about the pastor who one Sunday morning, he preached a great message. Oh, I mean, he really hit it. Hit the ball out of the park. And he's feeling pretty good about it, because people are filing out saying, "Oh, great message, Pastor, great message." And so he's driving home, and his wife and they're going to go to Sunday dinner. And he just really feels good about what he did this morning in church. And he looked at his wife and says, "Honey," he said, "let me ask you a question." He said, "How many great preachers do you think there really are in this world? I mean, how many great preachers do you think there really are?" And she said, "One less than you think." Ask the people around you, how good of a leader am I? Come on, talk to me. What am I from a 1 to a 10? And then number 3, what is my plan to increase my lid number? Okay, what plan do I have to get up to another level? And then, what are the lid numbers of those that work with me? Now, this is a great question. Now, this is going to take time. You can't do it, obviously, today, not in this setting. But I do want to encourage you to write down the names of 4 or 5 people that are the closest people to you. In other words, it's very important that they are good because they are working right beside you. And I want you to put their names, and then I want you to put the numbers on their heads. And then I want to ask this question. It's question number 5. What is my plan to increase their lid numbers? You see, what amazes me, let me just talk to you for a second. There are a couple things. Well, there are a lot of things that amaze me, but there are a couple things that amaze me about this subject right here. The moment that a person understands that leadership is key to their success, I'm amazed when I look at him and say, what is your plan to develop as a leader yourself? And many people I run into, the most people I run into, they look at me and say, well, I don't have a plan. Something so important and we don't have a plan? And then I'll ask them, do you believe those closest to you are going to determine the level of your success? They'll say, we sure do. Then I say, okay, then what's your plan to develop them? What's your plan to encourage them to grow as a leader? I mean, what are you doing to help them to go to another level? And they'll again look at me and say, John, what do you mean? Now, don't get discouraged, because I'm going to give you a plan before this conference is over. Because here's what I know. When you learn to grow yourself and when you learn to grow others, it's that day that your life will be incredibly, unbelievably changed. I received a letter the other day. I think I'll take a moment and read it. It's from a pastor up in Grand Rapids, and he said, I wanted to make sure that I told you that one law in particular has changed my life the most, and that's the law of the lid. He said, I heard you talk about it for the first time in Anderson, Indiana in 1993. He said, that's the day I understood that my leadership would determine my success. And then he goes on and says, John, that's the day I decided to become a leader. That's what I'm hoping for you. I wasn't going to do this, but I got a letter just the other day, too, from a fellow by the name of Dr. Gary Ashley. And Gary is talking to me, and he's talking about leadership and his development as a person. And he said that he came to a conference of ours. And he said, when I left the conference, he said, I had a whole new perspective of leadership. And he said a few months later, he said, God moved me to a new church. And it was a church about half the size of the one that I left. And it had been dead in the water for a number of years. But he said, I knew it was God's will. He said in 1992, the average worship attendance was 200 people. Now, okay, you get the picture. That's in 1992. Average worship attendance is 200 people. He said last Sunday, 1,034 people attended our 2 worship services. In 1992, our church's income was $414,000. He said last year our income was past $1.5 million. He said on Easter, we're going to rent our city's convention hall, and we are expecting 1,800 people to be present. Now, this is what I live for right here. I want to lift the lid in your life. Let me ask you a question. This is kind of an IQ test. How many of you, if you're in the business world, would like to grow your business? How many of you, if you're in the church world, would like to grow your church? How many of you, if you're in the academic world, would like to be a better leader? Just raise your hand. How many of you would like to grow? Would you raise your hand? Ooh. I believe that. And the good news is we're going to learn to take the lid and go higher. Now, at the end of each one of these laws, you're going to find a resource section. I'll have 4 or 5 things that will help you really learn the law that you have just learned. And the reason I have that is some of them you're going to be strong in, some of them you're going to be weak in. For example, the 5 levels of leadership is a 2-hour video kit that will help you understand the 5 levels of leadership in every organization. Then there's a Maximum Impact Club tape called Leadership Limitations. Another one in the Enjoy Life Club called Lifting People to a Higher Level. And then my book that I wrote a few years ago, Developing the Leader Within You. Resources to help take you to a new level.